it is something that that we want to do to achieve these SDG goals. And GWSC is established with the same objective to serve as a platform to bring in these innovations, the approach that have been made in the sector to mainstream citywide inclusive sanitation, to accelerate the efforts that we are doing for achieving this SDG goal 6, but also at the same time being very specific to the target 6.2. And we are all very much aware of these principles of citywide inclusive sanitation, the framework, especially the functions like responsibility, accountability, resource planning and management, but also at the same time, the outcomes like safety, equity, and responsibility. And one of the major activity under the Global Water and Sanitation Center is also to provide the technical advisory support to the governments and the IFIs in planning and designing sanitation projects, support during implementation, also the M&E. And that is how GWSC has continued their support. And last year, to continue the efforts that SCI FI, which was earlier Skilling City Institutions for India, to continue that significant amount of work and momentum that was done by the team. It was now it was shifted under the umbrella of Global Water and Sanitation Center. And then there has been a significant achievements through that initiative as well in terms of revising the urban sanitation policy with gender and climate inclusion and all of that. And the rest I will let my colleague Mr. Subhagato to highlight. But post that phase 1, the learning in Odisha, which has extended for over a decade now already, now it's the time to consolidate that information, to disseminate that information. And that's why we are here today, to learn through the experience from Odisha. But at the same time, what we also with the Global Water and Sanitation Center, with over 30 different TAs in the last 3 to 4 years, we definitely can say that CWIS for us, at least in designing our sanitation projects, has been a proven way to address the challenges of inclusivity or accessibility or sustainability in sanitation, in providing sanitation services, or also the infrastructures. And I'm sure that CWIS is not a very new concept to all of us participating here. We have implemented some principles of it or in entirety in the projects that we do. But how can we best monitor and evaluate this overall process about developing a framework and also monitoring the progress is something that we aim to cover today, and which we believe that will be useful for the work that we do. And we would also, GWSC would also like to very much thank NIUA, which is the central body for capacity building in India, but also for this collaboration, Ms. Mahreen and the team, and the support in designing and delivering this masterclass. So we are very excited at GWSC, and the team is very excited to have we had over, I think, 70 plus registration, and also from 8 different countries from the global south. So we are very much happy and excited about this masterclass, and would like to very much wish you a productive session and a good learning. So thank you so much. Over to you, Rajit.
Thank you, Isha. May I ask Dr. Subhagato to continue further?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rajit. Thank you so much, Isha. We are delighted from the SciAI team to be able to bring this event to you under the auspices of both NIUA and GWSC. This has been a flagship project in the SciAI program, and we've been working on an M&E framework for measuring CWIS to help cities, states, and nations monitor their progress against these comprehensive indicators. This framework, of course, is not the first one ever attempted. There have been a number of efforts in the past that where various indicators and principles have been developed around CWIS or aspects of CWIS, from which we've learned lots of lessons. whether it's about data availability, whether it is about localizing, having to localize indicators for specific contexts, or if it is about how do you automate or scale up this process across different geographies, two geographies not being the same, right? So the challenge in this work for us was essentially to learn from the various monitoring and evaluation attempts and exercises that have been conducted in the sanitation frame in the past, let's say, 10 years, and to try and bring together a kind of way of localizing it so that the exercise is both useful to the evaluators and setting out a path for growth for the states and the cities involved too. So it has to be beneficial not only for the exercise in itself, but for the governments involved in the process. That has been the underlying principle on the basis of which we engaged with this exercise. I'm delighted that we have managed to come to this stage where we are in a position to share the methodology and the first attempts of embedding this in Odisha with you today. And the objective of this masterclass essentially is for experts essentially to kind of engage with this process and this framework that we've thought through with as much effort as we can from our side. And for you as governments reach out to you as to do evaluations of their sanitation exercise, what are the principles and processes that you can use to come up with something that is comprehensive in the nature of CWIS? So the main objective is to try and convey these ideas around measurement that are particularly suited to CWI's principles and as well as to local contexts, and how that methodology can be further developed. We of course will have all this material will be available both at the NIUA website and at the AIT GWSC website. There will be additional material supporting the work that we are presenting today in terms of what might be standard TORs for, let's say, the government, floating, RFPs for engaging agencies in monitoring and evaluation of water and sanitation, and supporting pitch decks possibly for CWIS. So there will be a whole package which will be part of this exercise. But for today, the main objective is through two sessions, which are backed with 15-minute question answers at the end of each session. The first being, which will more talk about these approaches and the general indicator framework. And the second will demonstrate to you how this was applied in Odisha and what were some of the results and learnings that we have got to understand in the case of Odisha. So welcome again, and we are so happy that we are actually doing this on the 19th of November, the World Toilet Day. So congratulations for another milestone in this sanitation world. And over to you, Rachit, and for taking it forward.
Thank you, Dr. Subhagato, and a very happy World Toilet Day to you indeed, to everyone here. May I ask Dr. Mahreen to take it forward and give us how NIUS perceives CWIS in India? Yeah.
Thanks, Rachit. First of all, a very happy World Toilet Day to one and all. What a way to start this whole notion about inclusive sanitation, to talk about framework, to talk about monitoring and evaluation at the time of the World Toilet Day. We are well aware that data is integral to make an informed decision. And most of the countries, including India, is talking about inclusive sanitation. Maybe these terminologies are somewhere embedded in our whole national frameworks, be it India or South Asia as a whole. And thus, a data-driven approach will give us a new dimension of how to plan our cities in a more inclusive way in order to reach to the last mile and in order to reach to the poor people. And monitoring and evaluation framework, which will be showcased in this masterclass, will help to plan our cities better, present as well as future, and importantly, how we can integrate them into our own. Like in India, we have the city sanitation plan, so that cities are able to take an informed decision. On behalf of NIUA, I thank CWSC and SCI to make NIUA part and parcel of this whole collaboration, because we all are striving towards inclusive sanitation or inclusive and livable cities. And I'm sure everyone over here will value this masterclass and the content which will be shared, because seeing is believing, and this framework is testament of what has been done in Odisha. So it's not reinventing the wheel, but something which is tried and tested. So it gives you a reflection of how states can work towards a more informed approach. So yes, all the best, and looking for a fruitful session ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Mahreen. I would request everyone if we can have a group photo. So if everyone can turn on the cameras, wherever possible. And just to celebrate the World Toilet Day from our end and your end as well. See a lot of faces already. Shaurya, can you take a screen? Shaurya, can
Shaurya,
Yeah,
you'll just take down the screen. I guess it'll be easier to take a picture.
right. Yeah, I'll just do that.
perfect. Let me just grab a couple of screenshots.
Done.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks, Rachit. We'll hand it over to Dr. Mohanty then for the first session. Dr. Mohanty will be moderating the session, right, Rachit? And I guess the presenters are Abhinav and Abhinav Kumar and Shaurya Gupta from SciAI team. As I just mentioned, this will set the context and talk through the process that has been evolved for localizing the M&E process. And then the next session will be more depth about the case study of Odisha itself. Over to you, Dr. Mohanty.
Yeah. So taking the cue from the previous speakers, I like to only highlight a few things here, is that the global indicators have been developed and designed to measure the key aspects of each of the 6 focus areas in the CWIS framework. While global level indicators are quite useful, India-specific M&E framework is required to address many aspects of CWIS in the Government of India's flagship program, of which are not captured in a way that actually assess or report on the CWIS readiness of the cities. Thus, using the current programs and schemes on sanitation that are being implemented by the government, the India-specific framework can possibly assess the progress of cities with respect to the CWIS principles. Keeping that in view, we have also taken up this in Odisha specific as a case study to at least see that how it has been at least implemented in case of Odisha and to showcase it today in this particular event. So keeping that in background, we are having a session, the first session where we are only focusing the, it is mentioned that the main focus is that the approach and methodology to CWIS, principle of CWIS, mapping of CWIS principles with a framework, translating CWIS principles into sub-principles and definition, collecting and reviewing the indicators from World Bank PAS, Athena, Surveycon, and developing up the general indicators. So before I invite my colleagues to make presentations or take the session forward, I would also request to all the participants that after this presentation, we'll be having this Q&A session. And that during that point, I will request all participants to put their questions in the chat box so that we can at least look at it and group them. If there is a number of questions in a similar kind of nature, then accordingly put the speaker to at least address these questions. And another thing would also I like to put it here is that this discussion will continue as a part of this question and answer session. But after this, we do have 5 minutes break. But we believe that the session will continue. Those who want to at least take kind of break, they can take break in between, but the process will continue. And after that, we'll go to the switch over to the second session. So this one, I just wanted to highlight it here. Now I can invite my colleagues, Abhinav, to at least start the session, presentation. Over to Abhinav, please.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mohanty. Next slide. Yeah. Shaurya, can move to the next slide. Yeah, so while Shaurya moves to the next slide, still not showing. Yeah.
Did it change?
No. Yeah, now it changed. Yeah. So over the last 1 decade, we all know that there has been a lot of progress in sanitation, especially in urban areas. There's been a lot of policy focus that has emerged in the domain of sanitation. So we can see in 2016, and this is from an Indian perspective, but this is true for most of the global south, where sanitation in cities have increasingly become more and more important as the global south is urbanizing. So we see in 2016, the formal FSM was almost 0% of 1.3 billion. So most of the FSM sector was informal, and there was a lot more focus on sewer, but it was only restricted to bigger cities, and that too in specific areas. Gradually, it evolved, and as of now, as of 2030, we see that not only the bigger cities, but the smaller cities are more and more formal FSM is coming. And if you can look at the maps, it shows you what is the percentage of population that is dependent on FSM. As we can see in some of the states like in Odisha, where FSM has really gained traction among the sanitation policy, the percentage of urban population dependent on FSM has reached more than 70%. Odisha currently has each city has its own FSTP, and same for Maharashtra and few other states also, where FSM has been taken up very prominently. So we see, show the next slide. So we see citywide inclusive sanitation as building on the gains that we've already acquired over the last decade in sanitation. So when we say citywide inclusive sanitation, what do we exactly mean? There are the 4 important aspects of citywide inclusive sanitation. One is everyone benefits from adequate sanitation service, and the focus is on equitable access to all sections of society. Then effective resource recovery and reuse. This is very important from the environmental perspective, because one of the main reasons why there's a lot more focus on sanitation is because of the environmental damage it can do to the river, to the water bodies. Then diversity of technical solutions. So if we have to reach maximum number of population and to most cities, there has to be a mix of technical solutions, which in combination can address the access issue. And then the safety of the human waste, and the focus on the safe management of human waste is also very important, both from the environmental perspective as well as from the community perspective. So how do we sort of develop a CY monitoring systems based on the aspects that we've seen on CY. How do we monitor it? So different states, different cities, different countries have different approaches to how do they manage or monitor sanitation. So basically, when we are thinking of CYs, we are thinking not of it as an end goal, but as a process, process that actually takes into consideration the diversity of policy, diversity of data systems, and all of that, and gradually move towards a stage where uh, there's a holistic CWIS monitoring. So we see that CWIS the first phase of CWIS monitoring is where the data is collected and maintained by different sectoral stakeholders, which most of the cities and states in global south, basically somewhere around CWIS 1. Then from there, we gradually move towards CWIS 2, where data from all existing stakeholders are included within the CWIS framework. And Maharashtra and Gujarat are two states in India which are example of uh, those who are trying to converge all the data from different stakeholders into one system. Then in the next stage, where there's a common data warehouse, there's independent regulator, independent evaluations. We have examples from Malaysia and Philippines who are sort of moving towards that model. And then finally is the most advanced stage of CWIS where there's common data point, independent regulator. But this all of this data and evaluation actually also feeds into policy and planning. So it's so that it becomes a continuous process of evolution, where citywide inclusive sanitation can constantly respond to the emerging needs as countries urbanize and cities grow bigger and bigger and more complex. Next slide, Shweta. Yeah, Shweta, next slide. Next. So basically, how do we operationalize such a monitoring system? Taking you from our approach of CWIS as a process, what we've tried to do is to devise some methodology of how do we sort of develop this monitoring system and how do we move from CWIS first phase to CWIS fourth phase. So first is to understand the principles on which CWIS has been made. Once we have understood the principles, then the second step is to look at the sort of divide these principles into sub-principles and define these sub-principles, which will help us develop an operational model for this. So before delving into the indicators, we look at the existing CWIS indicators from World Bank, uh, from PAS, which has been developed by CWAS, and then CWIS indicators are developed by Athena, and then Search Survection, which is a uh, Government of India sanitation survey. Based on this, the review of the existing indicators and the sub-principles, we sort of develop general indicators for CWIS. And we then the general indicators are converted into state-specific CWIS indicators. One of the steps that is leading to this development of state-specific indicators is a review and analysis of state-level policies and data systems, based on which we devise state-specific indicators. And then this state-specific indicators are collated to develop a national-level indicators. And we will see step by step how we sort of develop this idea. Sure, next slide. Yeah. So basically, one of the approach papers, BMGF and others have sort of defined some principles for CWIS and a framework. So what we have done is we have sort of mapped this framework and the principles. So we see that two set of principles. One is related to service outcomes and another is related to system functions. The service outcomes are basically looking at the equity, safety, and sustainability. When we say equity, is the fairness and distribution and prioritizations of services to marginalized communities. Safety, it talks about both safety of the safety of the citizens, workers, and communities. And sustainability looks at both financial sustainability, environmental sustainability, and different aspects of sustainability. And what are the principles on which we build? We have sort of defined those principles. You can see for equity, there's everyone in an urban area, including the urban poor, benefit from equitable and safe sanitation service. Gender and social equity are designed into planning, management, and monitoring, and not as an afterthought. Same for safety. Human safety is basically managed along sanitation service chain, starting with containment. Sustainable authorities deploy a range of funding, business, and hardware approaches, seaward, non-seaward, to meet sustainable goals of sustainability. In the system functions are the enabling functions which enable us to provide equitable, safe, and sustainable sanitation systems. And this, we see there are three parts: responsibility, accountability, and resource planning and management. Responsibility is basically where authorities have a clear and inclusive mandate, including performance target, resource, and are accountable to their roles and responsibilities. Accountability basically looks at the data systems and processes which sort of enable organization institutions to perform their functions. Then resource planning and management is judicious use of resources through comprehensive long-term planning, which responds to emerging demands also, which have the ability to respond to emerging demands. Once we have understood the overall CWIS principles and CWIS frameworks, then we move to the next step. Next slide. Yeah. So in the next step, we sort of develop sub-principles and then define those sub-principles. Next. First, we need to understand why are sub-principles required when we already have principles. So when we set to the task of operationalizing this monitoring framework, one of the challenges is the sub-principles are a little abstract, not mutually exclusive. They have overlapping mandates, and then it also sort of looks at doesn't take into consideration diversity of context. So principles are, because they are by nature abstract, it doesn't look into the different cities at a different journey in their sanitation, of a different kind of technologies, of different policy priorities, and all of that. The principle doesn't really take into consideration. So with sub-principles, what we're trying to basically do is to create these mutually exclusive sub-principles, which can be easily translated to indicators and allows for diversity of policies, data systems, and capacities of the government. It also allows incorporation of variation of policy priority. And most important, it allows for incremental step-by-step implementation that we've seen in the CWIS approach when we move from part one, CWIS 1 to gradually CWIS 4. Yeah, next slide. Yeah. So basically what we have done is for each of these six principles that we have seen earlier, we have sort of developed sub-principles. So service outcome, equity, safety, and sustainability. In equity, when we're talking about sub-principles, we're talking about access to marginalized communities, equity of sanitation workers, gender equity, public participation, and deployment of public finance. Safety, we're talking about safeguarding citizens and community, and as well as safeguards of sanitation workers. And sustainability, we're looking at environmental, financial, and human resource sustainability. Similarly, for system functions, we are in responsibility, we are looking for whether there are specific institutional mandates for different organizations involved in providing sanitation, whether there's a mandate for equity, explicit mandate for equity, explicit mandate for gender equity, for resource allocation, for accountability. Then in accountability, we're looking at whether there are data systems in place, whether there's a data collection, whether gender disaggregated data is available, data monitoring is continuous, data transparency is ensured, and there's a feedback mechanism or not. In resource planning, we're looking at how do we sort of allocate financial resources, whether the data-driven, transparent, and consultative processes are there for resource planning or not, and what is the overall resource planning framework. For service outcome, we are basically, when we are defining sub-principles, we are focusing on two things. One is the access of the services, and second is how efficient are they in their operations. So we have divided the sub-principles also based on access and operational efficiency, which gives a sense of where exactly that states have to focus. Some of the states will be will perform better on access, and some will be on efficiency. Those were the improved access might work on operational efficiency, might focus more on operational efficiency. Similarly, for system functions, we have divided them into mandates and enforcement. So many of the mandates is basically whether the existing policies and processes are in place. And enforcement is whether the states and organizations have the capacity to enforce those mandates or not. So we sort of measure these two things when we are looking at these sub-principles. Yeah, next slide. So now we have looked at different kind of CWIS indicators from different organizations, and Shaurya will take you through that. Shaurya, over to you.
Thank you, Abhinav. So, as we developed a universal and comprehensive list of CWIS indicators, we examined four key frameworks of PAS, Athena, World Bank, and SWAT Sarvekshan. Each of these frameworks offers unique strengths. PAS emphasizes service delivery and institutional performance. The World Bank focuses on governance and sustainability. Athena provides a lens on inclusivity and equity, while SWAT Sarvekshan captures community engagement and cleanliness. By collating these diverse perspectives, we aim to create a holistic framework adaptable to Indian urban context. Then, to
Just give us a second.
Not audible.
Just a minute, sir, I was trying to reconnect.
There is some issue, connection issue, right?
Yeah.
Now you are muted.
If you have the yeah, if any of you have the PPT, please share it. I can continue while Shaurya rejoins. Should I share?
Yes. There is some issue, connection issue, right?
Yeah.
Let me share my screen. Is it visible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll continue from where Shaurya lives while Shaurya joins again. So basically, we have looked at these different organizations and the CWIS indicators that they have developed. So PAS focuses more on service delivery and situational performance and collects a lot of data on different aspects of sanitation, including water supply and all of that. Athena basically builds on the existing CWIS principles and brings a strong lens of inclusivity and equity into the indicators that they've developed. Whereas World Bank prioritizes governance, sustainability, and also looks very strongly at the financial sustainability of the model. Swachh Sarvekshan indicators are more focused on the community engagement and public participations in the sanitation drives, and the Swachh Bharat mission is the overall framework within which Swachh Sarvekshan indicators operate. So what we've done is we've looked at each of them, and prepared a comparative list of indicators from all the four indicators framework, PAS, Athena, World Bank, and Swachh Sarvekshan indicators. We have sort of removed the duplicate indicators that have overlap between the different frameworks and have sort of removed them. Then we have compared these frameworks to identify what are the differences and similarities between each of them, and then analyze the suitability of indicators to the Indian context was to adopt and build on the indicators that has already been developed. So if you can see, when we looked at Athena, so this is basically a comparison of the different kind of equity indicators developed by all the four frameworks. You see, Athena, there's focus on gender pay gap, training, right to unionize, and all of that. Public participation, there are women in decision-making bodies or not, women in leadership position or not. Deployment of public finance, they've again subsidies for non-sewage sanitation. So basically, we have taken the sub-principles that we have defined, and on those sub-principles, we have try to see how the different indicators, what kind of indicators different organizations have on related to those sub-principles. So when we see equity of sanitation workers, almost all the four indicator frameworks have something or the other. When we see to access to all women and transgenders toilets, we see that World Bank takes into consideration access to women explicitly. Swachh Sarvekshan looks at female sanitation workers, whether they have different PTCTs, but PAS and Athena doesn't have an explicit indicator on women and access for women and transgender to toilets. Same for public participation, where women in decision making, all apart from Swachh Sarvekshan, the other three looks at the issue of participation of women, deployment of public finances, again, PAS and Athena focuses a lot more than World Bank and Swachh Sarvekshan. Similarly, for safety, we see that all of them have some indicators for safety. The focus varies. Some are more focused on the safeguarding of cities and communities, a little less focused on safeguarding sanitation workers. Similarly for sustainability, they have different approaches. World Bank focuses a lot more on the financial sustainability than human resource sustainability and environmental sustainability. PAS again also focuses more on financial sustainability. So if you look in terms of sustainability, there's a lot more focus on financial sustainability and a relatively lesser focus on environmental and human resource sustainability. Then we look at enforceability, and we see that all Athena, World Bank, and PAS have sort of clear frameworks for public mandates, for mandates of public authorities, both in establishing and enforcing. Private Athena and World Bank also includes the mandate for private services. The PAS doesn't. And SBM sort of doesn't even look at responsibility and mandate and enforcement of mandates. Accountability again is one of the areas where most of the existing frameworks are a little weak. We see World Bank has very little on the data collection and reporting, gender disaggregated data monitoring and transparency. Athena provides a little focus, but we see one of the major gaps is the gender disaggregated data collection and reporting. There are no indicators which sort of track whether whether the institutions involved in providing sanitation are actually collecting gender disaggregated data and reporting it. Resource planning and management, again, Athena and World Bank have few indicators on this. PAS is much more comprehensive in terms of resource planning. SBM doesn't even takes that into consideration. So we see that there are gaps in each of these monitoring frameworks that are existing, and we sort of try and address this gap and build on the work that these monitoring frameworks and organizations have already done. So now what we have done is, after we have done the analysis of the different indicator frameworks, existing CWIS indicator frameworks, we've also looked at the SDG framework and how our existing CWIS principles map the SDG indicators. You see, equity is basically catering to different SDG, so ending of poverty, ensuring availability and sustainable management of water, reducing inequality, making cities and human settlement inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. By sort of building a CWIS system, we're also addressing many of the, so contributing to the improvement in many of the SDG indicators. And for each of one of them, we have mapped, you can go through this in detail. For sustainability, responsibility, accountability, we've sort of gone in detail in each of them, and how these different SDG goals and SDG indicators are catered by CWIS principles. Now we come back to development of general indicators, which is basically the broader framework on which CWIS monitoring system works. So what is the structure of this indicator? What does this indicator looks like? Well, there are sub-principles attached to each indicator. So for each sub-principles, we have a set of indicators, general indicators. Now these general indicators are derived from sub-principles, and we see how these are derived. And then one of the important part of this indicator are the keywords. And keywords are part of general indicators, and they sort of provide the flexibility. They make the indicators flexible and adaptable for different states and cities. They can choose from these keywords on what based on their policy priority, based on the capacity, and based on their understanding of the CWIS system. What does a general indicator look like? So we have just taken one example, and we'll see a little more in detail. So the sub-principles is all members of marginalized communities have access to safe and functional sanitation infrastructure and services. Now, here the keywords for us are marginalized communities and safe and functional sanitation infrastructure and services. So we have sort of these keywords of marginalized communities and safe and functional sanitation infrastructure and services allow us to interpret this based on policy priorities, based on context, based on data available, based on the capacity of the state. So we've derived two general indicators out of it. One is what percentage of members of marginalized communities have access to safe and functional household or community level sanitation infrastructure. And second is what percentage of public and community toilets in the city will fulfill the accessibility norms. So you see, basically what we're looking at is the household level infrastructure also, but we're also looking at the public infrastructure related to sanitation. How does this operationalize? So we see this is the general indicators: percentage of members of marginalized communities in access to safe and functional. The value it records the value in percentages. We have sort of given a definition, and we have identified two keywords in this: marginalized communities and functional household. What does this keyword means? So marginalized communities can be defined in a number of ways. So we have given a suggestive list. So it could be female-led households in certain contexts. It could be transgender households. It could be slum dwellers, urban poor, differently abled, religious minorities, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, senior citizens. What is a functional household or a community sanitation infrastructure? It could be, so the three parts to this household or community sanitation infrastructure. One is the individual or shared toilet. Second is the water connection, and third is the sanitation system. What kind of sanitation system it is connected to? So these all three sort of constitute together the household or community sanitation infrastructure. When we say water connection, again, there are different kind of water connection with water source outside the toilet, but within premises. Water source outside the premises and then water source inside the toilet. Again, in sanitation system, there are different kind of sanitation system that they are attached to. So these are and now states and cities can choose. For example, just to give an example, and we'll discuss it in detail how we have done this in context of Odisha. In Odisha, there's a lot of focus within sanitation on slum dwellers, right? So Odisha might choose to focus on slum dwellers and urban poor, for example. And when it says functional household system, it can choose to have a combination of these three. So they can say they will every household which have an individual toilet, which have a water connection outside the toilet but within premises, and let's say something which is connected to a sewer or a septic tank without soap. We can consider that as a functional. So what is functional can be defined, can be adapted by different states and cities. They can choose a combination of the different factors that we have sort of listed in the keyword. So this is the function of keywords that we have. And in the next session, we'll look in detail how exactly that we have done this in context of Odisha. Then basically the second indicator that we are looking at is the, so this was an example of from equity, which is a system, which is a service level CWIS principle. Now we look at a system level function, which is accountability. So in this, one of the indicators that we have is that an agency and department and institution creates a data collection and reporting mechanism for all public and private organizations involved in sanitation value chain. And it will be a yes, no kind of answer. So basically the idea is that each organization that is involved in sanitation delivery and infrastructures should know what data they have to collect and what data they have to report. Once they know, they will be able to build that system. And in that, we've sort of looked at identified two keywords. One is agency, department, institution, and second is data collection and reporting mechanism. Now, again, we have sort of divided this into keywords. So agency, department, institution, it could be an housing and urban development department. It could be a semi-autonomous institution. It could be an independent regulator. And how this works is basically we can look at it as in a progressive manner. That initially it is housed within the housing and urban development department, but gradually as it becomes more and more formalized and professionalized, it moves to semi-autonomous institution and finally to an independent regulator. Then data collection and reporting mechanism. So what kind of data collection reporting mechanism and what kind of information do organizations need for this? One is they need a list of data points that they have to collect and report. The urban local bodies in the city collect and report all sanitation data. All public organizations involved in sanitation collect and report, and then all public and private organizations also collect and report sanitation data. You see this sort of building up on each one. You'll see what this means in a little while. Now, once you've defined the general indicators, now we are trying to we'll try and define the measurement framework that we have for these indicators. So we have CWIS principles. On those principles, we have developed sub-principles. On those sub-principles, we have developed general indicators. And on the general indicators, we'll develop state-specific indicators. Now, each general indicator has keywords, right? And these keywords are interpreted to develop state-specific indicators. So these keywords can be of two types: quantitative keywords and qualitative keywords. Now, quantitative keywords are those which, an example of it is marginalized communities. For example, female-aided households, transgender households, slum dwellers, all of them constitute a certain percentage of the population. And if we add up all of this, and there will be some overlap which has to be removed, we add up all of these, we can sort of measure what's the progress. So, for example, in the first phase of CWIS, if a city chooses to only focus on slum dwellers, then they can say 20% of population is covered by slum dwellers. Then they also include different labels, let's say 5% more, then it becomes 25%. Gradually, as more and more uh, keywords are included in the definition of state-specific indicator, the value of indicator, the progress will keep on increasing. Simple mathematical addition. Whereas when we look at the functional household or community sanitation infrastructure, it's actually a progressive build-up. So basically, a water source outside the toilet is qualitatively inferior water system for sanitation than water source inside the toilet. Right? So as cities develop the systems, they can move from one step. First step, they can have water source outside the toilet, then they can start measuring water source outside the premises, and then finally they can start measuring water source inside the toilet. So there's a basically qualitative aspect to these keywords. Now, state-specific indicators have basically three kinds of measurements that is done there. One is the measurement of indicator value. Second is the measurement of intensity factor, and third is the measurement of data quality. In the next session, we will see in detail how the indicators are measured exactly. But for intensity factor and data quality, we'll sort of lay down the framework, and we'll see in the next session how that is operationalized. So basically, as we move from CWIS 1 to CWIS 2, 3, 4, what we basically do is there's an incremental progress in indicator value. The data quality improves, the intensity factor also improves. And we will see what do we mean by intensity factor and data quality. So intensity factor basically measures the intensity with which state-specific indicator measure the progress on general indicators. And we said general state-specific indicators are derived from general indicators using keywords. So just to give an example, general indicators, marginalized communities are basically there's 9 kind of marginalized communities that we can focus on. So in the first stage of CWIS, we can choose to focus only on slum dweller. So the intensity factor of the state-specific indicator will be 11%, which is 1 divided by 9. So basically, out of the 9 communities that we can focus on, we have chose to focus on 1. So the intensity of the state-specific indicator is 1%. As we grow more, and let's say at the second stage we include 3 more, and now total count of marginalized communities become 4. So now we have 4 by 9, which is 44% intensity factor. So the idea is as we move from CWIS 1 to 4, the intensity factor of state-specific indicators keep on increasing as we cover more and more keywords. Right. So in terms of marginalized communities, as we cover more and more marginalized communities within the definition of state-specific indicator, the intensity factor of a state-specific indicator increases. Then we have the data quality. So in data quality, we have basically two things that we focus on. One is the data quality of the source, and another is the data quality of the indicator itself. So when we say source, we can look at if the data source that is providing the data has objectively verifiable data, then we can basically say the score can be 3. This is the high data quality. If the
1 minute more.
I'm just wrapping up. So if we have fragmented data which needs cross-verification, the data quality is basically low. If the data is calculated based on assumption or estimation, then it's a very low quality data. And in there are cases where there will be no data available. Then we have the data quality indicator level. So basically, if the average score of data sources, so what we have done is each data sources will be sort of scored based on the based on the quality of data. And then for each state-specific indicators, we'll be using bunch of data sources. For the value of each, the quality, the data quality score for each data source will be added up to sort of calculate the data quality at the indicator level. So it will be high if the score is between 0.75 and 1. High will mean that most of the data sources used to calculate the value of indicator are high quality data sources. Right? If it's medium, then we can say most of them are high, but some of them are low also. And if it's low data quality at the indicator level, which means that either it's low or very low normally. So this is how we sort of measure data quality at both the data source level and the indicator level. We'll see this in much more detail. It will become much more clearer when we see how we sort of work with this in the state-specific indicators. So this is basically, we have for service outcomes, we have three principles, and those three principles are built on 10 sub-principles, and overall 29 service indicators are there for service outcomes. And one of the examples is we've seen for equity, how we have sort of developed these 5 sub-principles and the different indicators that we have. We've seen the list, and as we move into the next session, we'll see detailed list of all principles, sub-principles, general indicators, and state-specific indicators for this. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mohanty.
Yeah. Thank you, Abhinav.
Are there any questions?
Yeah. Now I'll request participants, if they do have any questions, kindly put in chat box or may raise the questions by unmuting them.
And also mail in the questions. I think, it would be great if you can give like a small summary of your session.
Yeah.
Just so people have something to catch up on.
Yeah. So basically, in this session, what we have looked at is what are the broad principles on which CWIS monitoring system can be developed. Once we have identified the principles, just to operationalize the principles, we have developed sub-principles, and those sub-principles are converted into general indicators. General indicators are the broad indicators which can be adapted based on the context in which it is being formulated. And to allow for that adaptation, we have sort of identified certain keywords within each of the general indicators, which can be sort of interpreted based on the policy priority and the context. Once we have done this, once we have identified the keywords, we can then translate the general indicators into state-specific indicators. Now, once the state-specific indicators are developed, then we can sort of look at how do we measure these state-specific indicators. And there are 3 things that we are basically focusing on. One is to look at the value of the indicator itself. For example, if we are looking at access to sanitation for slums, then the indicator value looks at what percentage of slum dwellers have access to safe and functional sanitation services. So that's the value of the indicator. Then we have the intensity factor, which basically measures that with what intensity the state-specific indicators measures general indicators, which would essentially mean that what percentage of keywords are being covered by state-specific indicators. And in the context of marginalized communities, we have seen that we identified 9 marginalized communities. So intensity factor would mean what percentage of these marginalized communities, number of marginalized communities have been covered by state-specific indicators. Then we look at the data quality itself. And in data quality, we're basically looking at data quality at 2 levels. One is at the level of data source itself, where the data is coming from. And the second part is basically looking at the data quality at the indicator level. So if, let's say, one particular indicator can have different kind of data sources with different kind of data qualities. Some of the data sources can be of high quality, some of that can be of poor quality. So we sort of calculate an average value of data quality at the indicator level to understand what kind of data quality we have. So at the indicator level, we have 2 very important things. One is the intensity factor, another is the data quality. And as CWIS progresses from phase 1 to phase 4, both the quality of the data and the quality of the intensity factor of the indicator both progresses further. So that's the overall summary of the general approach towards CWIS monitoring framework that we have taken. Yeah, that's the overall summary. Over to you, Dr. Mohanty.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, we'll be happy to clarify.
Mr. Avinash has a question. Maybe you can unmute and ask.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. First of all, a wonderful presentation. I just wanted to ask your team, uh, like based on your experience of doing this research, working around these indicators, what has been your experience in capturing the, like, you're looking at this certain indicators of the city and trying to look at like pulse indicators of where the city stands at. So how do you look at the extent of decentralization? Like suppose there is a small cluster where an asset is being managed. Now, if it can be handled at the community level and the city urban local body doesn't have to look at that, there would be so many such assets in a city. So are there indicators to evaluate the extent of decentralization? That's one question I have. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, so if we look at the data part of the decentralization, because different entities will be managing differently. So in the data, what we have sort of in the accountability, what we've done is we have sort of created a general indicator in a way that uh, it provides the suggested data points for each of the public and private institutions that is involved in maintenance of sanitation infrastructure, provision of sanitation services. So if let's say, for example, I'm just taking an example of Odisha, where SDAs are one of the key organizations, key institutions which sort of manage slum level infrastructure. So in that, what we can do is we can include SDAs in the list of institutions which can provide data, which does the sanitation infrastructure, does the maintenance of infrastructure. That will allow the SDAs to sort of report the data on the sanitation infrastructure and services. In the planning part also, we have basically in the equity, we have a specific sub principle on public participation. So public participation includes the participation of community level institutions like SHGs, SDAs, or any other form of institution that exists at the city or the state level. So we have allowed for this through the sub-principles indicators, we've allowed this public participation, citizen feedback, all of that is woven into the framework through that. And when you see Odisha example, we have sort of looked at each of them. The community participation is one of the major focus when we're looking at equity, when we're looking at resource planning, when we're looking at accountability.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe I can ask another question. Is when you're talking a lot about data types and data intensity, so going from stage 1 CWIS to stage 4, how often or how frequently do you switch after data types to be more integrated into it rather than look at it from an overall helicopter view?
Can you repeat again? Couldn't get you. Get the last part.
Yeah. How often or when do you think it's the right time to switch looking into the intensity of the data? Because what I assume by that is means going from very general data types to a very specific core function areas. So how often or what is the stage at which you need to switch?
Yeah, so there's no clear bound step-wise. It's a gradual progress. So basically, once we have defined the framework, a city defines a state, defines a framework, and it sits on that path, it will gradually evolve over time. So it also depends on priority. So for example, at one point of time, for example, I'm just giving an example, a state or city is used to focus on slums, right? Now, the reason they may want to choose slums as the starting point is because slums sort of cut across different kind of marginalized communities. So the probability of concentration of marginalized communities in a slum is much higher. So they might want to start with slums, right? So once they saturate sort of slums, they might want to look at other kind of marginalized communities, right? They might want to focus on differently able. They might want to focus on transgenders, right? So gradually, as policies evolve, as capacity of a state evolves, as prioritization evolves, right? It will keep on gradually changing rather than having a very clear stepwise. Now we move from step 2 to step 3. It will be more gradual progress as policy priorities evolve and more marginalized communities are included in the process.
Thank you, Abhinav. That's clear.
So, Rachit, there is a question in
Yeah,
chat
there is a
box.
question in the comment section. It's
Mm.
by Marina. How can all this amazing work be introduced into practical tools? That is, how we can ensure that ULBs are able to conduct CYs and M&E themselves.
That's a very interesting question. And so basically, we have tried to implement this in Odisha, not implement as a, but try to adapt the system to Odisha and develop certain indicators for it. So I think and I think intense capacity building is definitely needed for CY system, but also existing policies, existing processes need to be evolved along with capacity building, allow for this kind of M&E framework, which focuses not only on measuring the excess, but also measures the policies and processes that are put into place, right? And we can see we have tried to do this in the context of Odisha, try to operationalize it in terms of developing indicators and all. But much of this depends on states' willingness, cities' willingness and capacity to adapt it and adapt it to their own context, right? And of course, capacity building is central to developing is central to ULB's ability to adapt the system.
Marina, I hope that answered your question. And I think if there is no other question, should we move on to the next round, Dr. Mohanty?
No, another question is there, Rachit. Alka,
Oh, we have
Lisa
another
raised question.
question.
Yeah. Can you read this question, please?
So Dr. Redwan from ITIN with Bangladesh, she's asking that you mentioned importance of data quality during the progress from CWIS 1 to CWIS 4. Is there a significant measures taken for quality assurance?
Yeah. So basically, what we're trying to do is, if you look at the indicators under accountability, what we're trying to do is, as the CWIS progresses, one of the key point is to develop a data system, right? Because we've seen that in most of the cities in the global south, the data is fragmented, right, and is of poor quality. And one of the reasons why we've sort of put data quality as one of the things that we continuously measure and gives us an indication of what is the source of data quality. So basically, is that we move from fragmented data systems to sort of comprehensive data systems, integrated data systems, move from offline data entries to online data entry. We continuously measure this progress. For ensuring quality, there has to be clarity on what data has to be collected and reported by each of the involved indicators, each of the involved organizations and institutions. One is that. Second is, once you have identified this, we have a system that can allow them to collect and report data in a manner that ensures that correct data is reported. So that can be done through an integrated online system. And Sujog in Odisha is an integrated data platform which is trying to do that kind of thing. So we have some examples in which such integrated data systems are being built, which can sort of which allows a framework to be developed around data quality and allows the organizations to report and collect data in a transparent and reliable manner.
That's great.
I hope it
Dr.
answers
Asif,
your question.
if you want to ask any secondary question on jump on that, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
I just had a question, if that's okay.
Okay.
Y- Yeah,
Yes, sir.
so there's this whole focus. I mean, in the previous CSPs, like there was a framework developed by EWAG in the past called CLU Clues Sanitation 21 by IWA, and GIZ also had some kind of a framework. Now, one focus during that time was always for practitioners to try and make this like a living dynamic document, where people don't just make the document once and forget it, but are consistently using it like a feedback loop. In your experience, what do you think would motivate that kind of interest from the side of our clients, which are the urban local bodies, state governments, and all? And what do you think has not allowed that till now? Why is the city sanitation plan as a instrument not being used as a as a living document or something?
Yeah, yeah. So I think one of the major issues is to understand any plan as end goal in itself. So we plan and we forget, right? The idea, and that's why when we approach CWIS, we are approaching it through the lens of a process. So we are not looking at it as an end goal, but as a process. So once you institute a process, it sort of uh, it sort of creates a system which can take feedback and continuously improve itself, and that's why it's incremental in nature also. A lot of thing what happens is we try and create a plan and try to implement it in one whole go, which makes it difficult for cities to implement, mostly because of the capacity and the resource constraint. The idea is to
Not audible, Abhinav.
Just give us a small second. Trying to reconnect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I lost my connection. Yeah. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes,
you're
yes,
audible.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was saying it has to be a bottom-up process, and cities have to have that buy-in for any M&E system to work, right? And because we are approaching it as a process, it will continuously evolve and respond to the existing demands. And if cities can sort of keep identifying the demand and creating a data system will sort of go a long way in identification of demand for sanitation services, then only cities will be interested in this. If it solves their problem of providing equitable and accessible sanitation, uh, and they have the resources and the capacity to do so, they will be interested. Otherwise, might uh, it might have the same fate as many of the other plans that we have. So it's important to this to be a bottom-up process, and this to be responsive to the existing needs of the city and the urban local bodies.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank
Uh, Hi, I just had a quick question. Can I go ahead?
you. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
Thank you, Mr. Abhinav. Pretty comprehensive presentation. I've been working in the planning space for quite some time now. It's really nice to see the tool coming up in a very comprehensive way. Just I had a question in lines with what Ms. Marina and also Avinash had, is that what is the modality in which this tool will be launched or used, right? Like, is it a platform or is it like a standalone Excel-based tool or so on? Because that plays a very important role in terms of usability, right? That is one question that I had. And second, it's a smaller question related to the indicators. So the second is there provisions for setting self benchmarks, right? Like, everybody would have their own journey in sanitation and their own pace to climb up the ladder. So Does the tool provide provisions for setting of benchmarks and targets for at a city level or a state level?
This is the last question. After this, we can move to the second session.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of modality in this tool to be launched, currently it is in a form of Excel-based tool, but the idea is to gradually integrate this into an integrated online system. This provides a broader framework, uh, and based on this framework, uh, this framework can be used to sort of develop different kind of indicators, right? And I was saying different cities have a different pace of adaptation. I think this framework is designed to allow that particular thing, that for cities can choose to define their specific city-specific indicators in a form and manner that 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 is in line with the existing capacity in terms of both resources and the human resource capacity, right? And policy priority, of course. First question, it's an Excel-based tool, but the idea is to integrate this into an integrated online tool, which allows end-to-end data collection, reporting, evaluation, and all of that. And there is a provision when we say the reason why we have sort of developed this multi-tiered indicator framework is to allow for cities and states to choose what is the form and manner in which these indicators will be implemented, and they can define their own benchmarks for also, and these benchmarks can continuously evolve over time, right? In CWIS 1, they can say our benchmark is that we sort of cover only the slum dwellers, but in the second phase of CWIS, they can say we'll include all all slum dwellers, but we'll also include all transgenders or all differently abled and all of that. So it is a continuous evolution process in which they will keep choosing their priorities and responding to their own needs. Yeah, I hope that answers your questions.
Yes,
Thank
thank you so much. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Abhinav. After this, we would like to
Thank
move
you.
to the second session. I'd request Baisakhi to take over.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes.
Yeah.
All
So,
good.
sorry, yeah. So we move on to the next session now. And so this session, in continuation to the previous session, will focus on the approach to develop state-specific indicators for Odisha. So this presentation will delve deeper into what kind of data that we have collected, how we scored it, and followed by some recommendation as to how the state should proceed to the next stage of CWIS. So for doing this, what we have done is we have conducted this pilot, and we have developed around 52 state-specific indicators and collected around more than 90 data points to assess the progress of CWIS in Odisha at the current stage. And the progress is again audited against each sub-principle, which we just saw how we derived from the general indicators. And the values that we have got are actually values related to the indicator, the data quality, and intensity-based factor. So all these factored together gives a score to the CWIS indicator for the state-specific state-specific indicator. So so this is the approach and methodology that we have seen in the last presentation as well. So we will start from step 5. So after formulation of the general indicators, we went one step ahead and then reviewed and analyzed the state level policies and data systems of Odisha to identify what kind of policies they have, what are the existing data systems that they have, and kind of to assess what are the sources of data that could provide or feed into the data required for calculating the state specific indicators. So, and then finally, depending on the availability of the data, and we have analyzed those data to give it a score. So, as we know, Orissa is a state where they have a number of proper schemes, apps, and actions. So, for example, they have Basudha for 100% piped water supply. They have Jaga Mission, which is where they have been transforming the slums into livable habitat and providing access to mandatory in-house water supply and toilet, along with other infrastructures. Then they have Garima, which focuses on safety and dignity of core sanitation workers. They also have developed different apps and systems like Shujog and then Swas under Garima, where they collect data and for the implementation of the programs. They do have made amendments in the Act for earmarking funds for urban poor infrastructure development. So there are a lot of reforms that have that the state of Orissa has undergone, and all of these leads to CWIS in direct or indirect way. So after that, what we have tried is we have tried to map these systems into our CWIS framework to see to get an idea of where to get the data from up, like it's an, to get an idea of where to get the data from. And then after this analysis, we have moved ahead and um, prepared or formulated the state-specific CWIS indicator. So I'll just show you how we have derived these indicators. From the general indicator, we have derived this Orissa-specific indicators through the keywords that we saw in our last presentation. So, for example, if we are talking about percentage of members of marginalized communities having access to a safe and functional household or community level sanitation infrastructure, this is the general indicator. Then we see there are two keywords that we want to consider here. One is the marginalized communities, and then the functional and safe household or community level sanitation infrastructure. So, in order to derive a state-specific indicator, here what we have considered is the slum households. So, marginalized communities can again have 9 categories of categories, but we have specifically chosen slum household for Orissa because Orissa had been focusing much more on slum dwellers, and they had a lot of proper programs, like I already said, and they had data readily available. So for Orissa, at this stage, we started with slum households, and again, we considered individual or shared toilet connected to a sewer or a containment system and water source within premises. So the Orissa specific indicator that we derive from the general indicator becomes percentage of slum household having access to an individual or shared toilet connected to a sewer or a containment system and water source within premises. Now, similarly, we have done it for each and every sub-indicator. So there are 2 more examples if you see. So if you see general indicator EQ 1.1, this I have already detailed in the last slide. So if you see EQ 1.2, where we are talking about percentage of public and community toilets in the city fulfilling the accessibility norm. Again, for accessibility norm, here is the keyword, and it again comprises of various categories like access to cities, facilities for the disabled, women, children, elderly, medically unwell. And for Orissa specific indicator, again, we have considered the mandatory accessibility norm of cities within 500 meter. So in our last session, we already had a question on how if there's a flexibility for the states to start where they want to. So yeah, they can choose their state specific indicators basis the focus of the government, the vision of the policies, what the state of CYs or the sanitation infrastructure that are at that the state are at present. They can choose it from the keywords and move forward. So yeah, again, so there's one more example on percentage of members of marginalized communities having access to safe sanitation services, where safe sanitation services, if you see, we have on-demand desludging, regular sewer cleaning, scheduled desludging. So here what we have considered is a percentage of slum households raising a desludging request. So that's the example of equity. We have developed similar Odisha-specific indicators across all the principles of CYs. So I'll show you the list after in a bit. After that, this is the data collection template that we have used. So if you see, this particular template can be divided into 3 parts. So the first part where we have the data collection template, it basically defines that to calculate the percentage of marginalized having access to functional toilet, what are the kind of data that we require, and then with that data, what is the unit and value. So this is the data collection template, and based on the values that we got from the sources, we calculated the value of the indicator. And after that, based on the source of data, the year of data collection, and then there are remarks from the field, we calculated the data reliability. So I'll just show you one example. So this is what the sheet looks like. So we have a Orissa specific indicator. For example, it's again the same example for ease. Percentage of slum households having access to an individual or shared toilet. So here the data that we require would be the total number of slum households, the slum households having access to individual or shared toilet, the slum households connected to a toilet with sewer system, and obviously the slum households which have access to individual shared toilet and have water within premises. So these are the data points that we would require for calculating the percentage of slum households having access. And then for that, we have got some values from Jaga Mission. And then we calculated the value. And then, like I was saying, that based on the source of data and the data availability of the data that we have got, we also have calculated the data reliability. For example, when we have said that this particular data point is 3, it means that this data is objectively verifiable. So under Jaga Mission, slum survey had been conducted, and we all know that there are 2919 slums across the states. So it's verifiable. So it is it's from the state, and its data reliability is 3. But when we come to the next data point, the number of households having access to individual toilets, at the time when we were collecting the data, at that time, a survey was going on. So it was an ongoing survey. So we had to do some estimation based on the data that was available at that time. Hence, we scored it 2. And then for the next 2 data sets, again, it was an ongoing survey. So we had to assume that every household had a containment system. And again, and since there is Basudha, which aims at providing water supply, 100% water supply to each household. It has access, we assume that all the household has access to water supply within premises. So that's why, since those are assumption-based data, we scored them 1. Then coming to the intensity factor, again, if we take the example of the same indicator that we have been talking about, where we want to see the percentage member of slum households having access to shared toilets with containment system. Here, like Abhinav has already shared, that there are 2 kinds of data. One is quantitative, one is qualitative. So the quantitative one is like the female for the marginalized communities, right? So there are 9 categories, out of which we are taking just 1. So it comes to 11.11. Now coming to the next one, where we're talking about the functional household and community sanitation. Here we have 3 factors: toilet, water connection, sanitation system. So we have assigned 1 to each, but we have also assigned a negative number, because individual toilet with water source with a containment system is the ideal system, but we do not want shared toilet or community. We do not, so individual toilet is the ideal one. So we do not want to incentivize shared toilet or community toilet. So that's why it has been assigned negative marks. So accordingly, the calculation has been done and the intensity factor has been calculated. So I'll just show you the data collection template. Let me know if you can see the Excel template. Is my Excel template visible?
Not yet, Baisakhi.
No.
Not yet?
No,
Okay.
not yet.
Okay.
You might just have to pull this down and share the
Yeah,
Excel
let
directly.
me share my whole screen then. Yeah, is it visible now?
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is.
It is?
But it's very small. You might want to.
Yeah. So yeah. So this is the Excel based template that we have. And if you see, we have data for all the 52 Odisha specific indicators like I was talking about, and we have collected around 90 data points to calculate the values of the indicator. So yeah, we have this detailed out for every principle, and accordingly we have the data reliability and scores as well. So and we also have the intensity factor calculated for every indicator again. So just to go back to the slide. Yeah. So from that, from the value, the data quality, and the intensity factor, we can achieve overall representation of the CWIS outcome, something in similar fashion. So if we see the responsibility is more has more scores than RPM. So here it is because Orissa already has the FSM regulation. They have specific standards for treatment for STPs. They have made amendments in municipal acts. They have laws. So so there are a lot of initiatives that are in place. So hence the responsibility score is higher. While if we see RPM, while there are municipal budget for sanitation infrastructure, there are some gaps in terms of city sanitation plan preparation through stakeholder consultation. So there are some gaps which has brought down the score of RPM here. And similarly, what we have done is we have calculated or as the indicator value for each principle. So this is for equity, for example. So if we see the value, it suggests that Odisha has made significant progress in improving the access to infrastructure and services for the marginalized group. But since we have considered slum households for calculating the Odisha specific indicator, the values have gone down while calculating the intensity factor. So while there's a considerable progress on improving access to toilets for slum dwellers, there could be more the progress towards improving accessibility for differently abled and senior citizen may be captured through in data, or provisions may be included for and this can form a base to move forward in CWIS 2. So while we can assess the progress of each indicator like this, we can also produce audit report which can show exactly how what is the data quality gives like it'll explain in detail the data quality, the intensity factor. So we can actually formulate a audit report kind of a thing, and then we can recommend some actions for the state, so that which can form the base to go into our next phase. Okay.
Baisakhi, next is going to be Dr. Mohanty, or you go have a few more.
So the next, for the next slide, the challenges of data collection, I would like Dr. Mohanty to please come in.
Thank you, Baisakhi. So taking forward from Baisakhi, as you rightly said, or rightly showed, the kind of number of policies, programs, schemes implemented by the government of Odisha to promote inclusive sanitation in the state. So keeping that in view, and after analyzing or reviewing all the policies, the schemes, we try to develop this, state-specific indicators, and created this data collection template to see that whether the schemes, policies are being implemented at the state level, how they are capturing this or addressing this CWIS at the state level and city level. That was the main intention of going to the field to collect the informations using that template, knowing the very fact that currently they do have the informations available. Maybe they are not having the kind of data framework which is not designed in terms of capturing informations so far the CWIS is concerned, but they do have certain informations available to at least address the CWIS implemented at the state level, because many policies and programs, they do have do have provisions for CWIS, which is being implemented by the government of Odisha at the state level. So keeping that view, we went to the state level and the city level, try to find out and identify the source where exactly these information are available, irrespective of the state level or state level. At the same time, within the state also, there are a number of schemes, programs implemented by the government, and they do have their own set of to at least capture the information on different aspects of these schemes and policies, whatever being implemented at the state level. So when we went to collect the informations from both the state and city level, we try to find out 2-3 things. So one thing we at least see that there are certain informations not available. Looking at the indicator, we saw that there are number of certain information which is not at all available at the city level. Secondly, there are some information available, but that not being captured in the database because the people those are engaged in collecting and compiling or recording that information are not oriented in that regard. Third things, there are certain information available, but they are partially available, not the whole or full information not available. These are 3 kind of things we observed on the ground while collecting these informations. And in this process, we also put certain things, how the things are happening on the ground. So we have only put some important aspect here that how the informations are being managed, maintained, and where exactly the information not available at all, where it is partially available, and where the information is not at all being recorded. So if you can see that, if you look at this slum and non-slum locations, particularly in terms of that addressing the Sujok platform, that what is the kind of while collecting or providing services to the slum people or non-slum people, the slum people are not recorded in the Sujok platform because when they go for collecting this information or providing this information, they do have the 3 kind of provisions like the institutional, commercial, and residential. So residential part includes both slum and non-slum, but they don't capture slum and non-slum as such in the Sujok platform. So that gives a kind of indication that if you really want to have a kind of equitable kind of a platform where you can at least provide service to both of things and also ensure the inclusive services, you have to have this provision in the data set to ensure that both the data collected from the slum as well as the non-slum households the city levels. Similarly, you can see that so far the price fee structure is concerned, similar way of thing is also happening. There is no such kind of special price structure or fee structure from slum or non-slum households. There is only one fee structure entire city, and that applicable to both slum and non-slum people, and the same fee structure for accessing the discharging service at the city levels. And while also Baisakhi mentioning that look at the kind of accessibility norms when you deliver and put the this particular indicator, saying that how in both in terms of accessibility and gender, how they are, whether they have been this particular provisions being implemented at the state level, city level, and in this regard, whether data are available or not. When we collect this information, we saw that this is only partially addressed, particularly in terms of, as Baisakhi mentioned, they just address in terms of distance factor, but they don't see that. So for the disabled people, how they can access this toilet, there is no provision from them because they say that there is a constraint of space. So that's why they don't at least record this kind of information at their level. Similar kind of things, gender also, we find they do have provision for male and female, but they don't have any scope for transgender people to have access to this kind of facilities. Neither the provision nor they do have address to this kind of provision in the policy programs, and they do need this kind of information if you at least address this particular indicator. So perhaps to address the CWIS principle at the state level. Go to the second slide, please. Yeah. And another important thing is that the people, those are working at the ULB level, and those are stakeholder at the city level to collect, compile, and record the informations. Sometimes we find that it's very difficult to know that how many people are working in this particular department or in particular ULB, because the ULB are different in size and they're particular in their size. So you cannot expect that all you will be having the same number of people working in the sanitation sector. But then while collecting the information from them, we found that even this record of having how many people are working in this particular section or sanitation sector and department within the ULB itself is not recorded at neither in the state level, even in the city level. It's very difficult. And if in the absence of this, people, how it is possible to at least manage, maintain, or provide a kind of effective service delivery at the city level is very difficult to at least know. And the similar kind of things, even those are there as part of the sanitation department, they don't, whether they get proper training or orientation to at least ensure that the kind of data they require to at least capture, collate, and record, whether they do have, and how many people have attended the training program, and whether there is any kind of gender segregation of the data, that how many female and male, at least out of them, they attend the program. That is also very difficult to get this kind of data at the ULB level. And in terms of financial resources, also there is also available, the no information not available, in the sense that how much of fund available for operational maintenance of PC with public talent and community talent, and that too on basis of men, women and transgender. That is also not, this information not available. The second thing is in this regard, that the amount of money provided to the ULB for for particular purpose of capex and OPEX for different infrastructure, and that comes from different sources. But if you go for collecting information overall in sanitation head, particularly how much money is allocated to particular, you will be taking forward for constructing and managing particular facility in terms of as a sanitation as a whole, that information is also very difficult to get it from the urban local bodies, because it is the money is allocated as part of different schemes and programs. Next slide, please. Yes. So there is also provision for budget provision that 25% of the budget has to be allocated for developing the development of the urban poor. But yes, that the Act, Municipal Act, Corporation Act that have been amended in this regard, guideline is issued. But while examining the budget head in the urban local body level, it is very difficult to find out any budget head which at least say that at least capture the ring-fenced budget for this urban poor within the budget itself, because they do have programmatic schemes, programs where they only get money from different sources, and they do at least calculate 25% of the overall that program, and accordingly they expend the money for this particular purpose without keeping any record of saying that this much of money at least allocated for this particular purpose at the city levels. And so far the complaint redressal thing is concerned, since there are number of programs are being implemented at the ULB level, so each program has its own complaint redressal system. So instead of if you do not have any kind of a common complaint redressal system, it's very difficult to at least see that how this complaints are being received and addressed at urban local body level. It's very difficult to capture, and also to see that whether it complies to the CWIS principle or not. So these are the kind of only few things we have highlighted, because we have 52 indicators and 90 data points, as Baisakhi mentioned earlier. So keeping that in view, we collected information. We just highlighted this information to showcase that how they capture the informations, how in terms of to comply or to address the CWIS principle of the state and city level. Keeping that in view, we proceeded for collecting the information and capture this information, and hope that this information will help in terms of furthering this improvement of the CWIS services at the state and district level. Thank you. Back to Baisakhi.
Yeah. So coming to the last step, which is collating state level indicators for developing national level indicators. So similar exercises can be done for other states as well. For example, if you consider Maharashtra, then they also have PAS, which is a existing data system. So such existing data systems can be leveraged to integrate the data collection for CWIS, and similar exercises can be taken up for other states, and some existing data systems can be adapted for calculating or implementing CWIS, and see at which stage the state is, and take it forward to the CWIS 4. So yeah, and once we have the state level indicators, they can be collated at the national level for developing national indicators as well. So That's our presentation for now. Thank you, and will be open for question answers.
Thank you. Thanks very much. We already had a question in the chat box, right, Rachit? But I think Nupur
Yes.
isn't here. Otherwise, it would be wonderful to understand that question. Baisakhi, do have a look at the chat box.
Yes.
If you do understand the what Nupur is asking, if you can type it down, she can get this
Yeah.
recording later and have a look at it also. But I think you're not there, right, Nupur? No, she's not there.
No, I think she out.
So, folks, any questions at this stage? Means the earlier session, you all had so many. Do you? I have a few questions in case I might ask some, but not to the panelists, more to the participants to kind of understand as to what do you think is the feasibility and do you think this is possible to do in other states? Of course, Orissa has been so focused on it, and we have Dr. Mohapatra here also with us. But more generally, do you think it's possible to do what more means whether there are anything in the tools that we should think about more? Any feedback will be very helpful.
You guys please feel free to unmute and
Can I make a point here?
yeah, sure,
Please.
go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Nice to listen to these very compelling inputs about the tool and its indicators. So, one thing that keeps biting me as a practitioner in the sector is that while these indicators are very granular and they actually can tell great stories about the state of the sanitation there, one thing which is bothering me is the ease with which a practitioner can input data and the ease with which a functionary at a municipal level can look at this tool and think that it will solve their Swachh Sarvekshan related mandate or their other responsibilities. How can so? I hope you're connecting with me. The point I'm trying to make is how can the tool become a value proposition for the municipal functionaries? Because we've seen with Swachh Sarvekshan and all that there's been a lot of intake on data-based learning, incorporating new tech and everything. But primarily because it started off as a monitoring tool and everything, but then now it's become a mandate. They are seeing some value there. So how can CWIS, because it is going to that level of granularity and adding that level of value, how can it solve this issue of that difficulty to feed in data and use it easily? Like, for lack of better example, maybe like how we use Swiggy, Ola, Uber and all, right? How could this become that kind of a digital interface? That's something which I want to ask, because both at the practitioners might find it very interesting to do this, but functionaries might find it difficult to bridge that gap. Yeah.
Sure. Should I try and answer this? Avinash, I think it's a very interesting question. I understand very much from the approach that this question is coming from. Essentially, I would think of three parts in a sense to answer the question. One is around comparing it with Swachh Sarvekshan as a tool, where essentially it was an incentive. It was incentivized by the national government that local governments have to pursue it, right? And there was a rating and competition attached to it, etc., etc. But that was towards looking at very specific progress on specific, very, around a set of issues which are very, which you can generalize at the national level for persuasion, for pursuing. Yeah. What Compared to that, this exercise is a much more detailed exercise and kind of assumes that Swachh Bharat has raised so much aspiration around sanitation that that it's like a self-inquiry, that they don't need incentives from above or someone telling them that you have to do this and you have to measure that, and that's why you're measuring it. Yeah, it has to be something that they accept more broadly, right? And frankly, there is significant gap here, because means in Orissa, when we undertook this exercise, and as everyone is so well aware, Elisa's just leaving, but about the Orissa case, it was self-motivated, right? There was Swachh Bharat to help the motivation at some level, but much of the sanitation exercise, the water supply exercises, the let's say the slum improvement exercises, the Garima scheme, a lot of the effort was self-motivated by the city and the state government, right? So I do understand that in scaling this up across, let's say, a country or in other countries, one will have to think through how to embed the CWIS measurement, localize it, and then embed it within the mindset of the governance framework, governance system itself, so that it's not necessarily a huge, a competition. It's a competition with yourself. It's like playing golf as against playing cricket, for example. You're not playing against another team. You're playing to improve your own capacities and capability. So there is that question. The second question is about ease of putting in the data. I think now, at least in India, there is lots of data being sought by different governments under different schemes. In Orissa itself, in PAS, for example, in Maharashtra and many other states, local bodies are putting in data. In Orissa, there is an e-government and Sehog exercise in which data is being inputted quite often. Yeah. And there means what Dr. Mohanty pointed out is that often in our data collection exercise, what we learned is that often the guys putting in the data, the people who are behind the machine putting in the data, do not very well understand how this data is going to be used to improve the system itself, right? So when they put in data and they do it in a very mechanical way. Hence, that kind of compromises. So there is some capacity and some enthusiasm that can be built around the data collection people about how this data is relevant for the broader scheme of things. That needs to be better communicated and better understood on the field. But overall, I do agree with you that much of this is going to have to be self-motivated. And how do you develop a program that is self-motivating is also part of the story, Avinash. If anyone else wants to add, Baisakhi or Abhinav, anyone? And Avinash, if we didn't really discuss your question, then do say it again, yeah?
Oh, no. I wanted to actually understand how you are perceiving this side of the problem. This was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Then I'll jump on and add one more question here, since we have participants from, across South Asia, Nepal, Bangladesh, and even we have participants from the other side of the ocean, from Kenya and Nigeria. How do you how are we expecting, or what similar factors do you see? So it will be easy to replicate the 10 years of effort that they have put in Odisha, a decade long effort of implementing the CWIS in Odisha to over there, and what are the key learning factors that they can implement to enable them to implement the whole CWIS structure in lesser time. Because I don't think CWIS, the 10-year is a feasible time any longer with the Agenda 2030 coming.
Right. So no, thanks so much for that question, Rachit. Means I think there are a couple of things here again. There's no straightforward answer, unfortunately. But so the couple of things involved are that the Orissa case gives us a host of lessons of how to do this rapidly and in different contexts. In the CWIS M&E framework itself, a lot of those learnings have come in. For example, let me just explain this through an example, that when any of these instruments that were used in the past, monitoring instruments which were not supported by Government of India, like the Swachh Sarkshan, which was not only supported, it was like an essential condition that you have to do it. In those conditions, these data collection exercises are seen by governments in general to be less rewarding, yeah, because they think they understand the situation very well, yeah. But what emerged in Odisha is what is called a learning organization, because newer things happened every 2 years, right? So that each time, like you're building an FSM system, you've covered it all, right? All your cities have it. But still, the whole city doesn't actually have it because the slums are not having it. Yeah, slums are still relying on community toilets, are still having to go far away. The water supply is not as reliable as you need it to be for running a good sanitation system. So how do you start involving newer areas associated to your core objective, but not directly in line with your core objective, is something that Odisha has taught us very well. There are a number of lessons learned at each phase of this exercise. We are putting together a presentation and a learning material for GS, the Global Sanitation School, which will be available both at the GWSC website and hopefully at the NIUA website too, and other places too, which will document these lessons in more detail. It's a little longish exercise, but I would like to say that it's a process. So achieving CWIS is not a one-time objective on which you design one project on. You can't have really a CWIS project, because at the end of the project, you will still have many criteria of CWIS that are yet to address in it. So it should be seen as an incremental process. And that's why this framework talks about CWIS 1, 2, 3, 4 to be defined by the local context itself, by the local governments involved themselves in consultation with the sanitation experts. Means often this analysis is actually so micro and detailed that maybe a local government can't do it for themselves, cannot learn lessons for themselves. They will need some specific sanitation advisors to work with them on it. But I think overall, it's very valuable, because you do find, even in a case like Odisha, where they have made so much progress, you can still find areas that they need more progress on. Mohapatra ji, are you there?
I'd like to add a point here, Mr. Hi.
Can't hear you very well.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Ravi, yeah.
I have a point to add here in regard to data entry at a micro level, especially when you look at these self-help groups which handle the solid liquid resource management centers. So one point which was coming out there is you can train these self-help groups to enter the data, but they should also have a financial mechanism or economic benefit where they sustain themselves by selling these recyclables, and you train them. If you keep these centers or self-help groups generate revenue on a regular basis, which they adapt it over a long run, and you train them, then this aspect of data entry would be made very it can be consistent. That one aspect, as you told, at a micro level, right? So this is one nuanced understanding from my field experience, which was observed. So this was in Chhattisgarh, and it could be also done at other micro levels, and Odisha as well. Just
Completely
wanted to add this
agree
point.
with you. Yeah, no, completely agree with you. Ravi, means even in Odisha, there is a standardization of, let's say, what kind of segregated material you need. The 50 different segregated amounts material, 50 different types of material being segregated and then being weighed and then on sold, right? But as far as I understand, till let's say last year, this hadn't been systematized across all the recycling centers in Odisha. Hmm. They were still work. It was still work in progress. But I completely agree with you that it is quite possible to do, as well as it will be super valuable for both policymakers as well as for the people, the self-help groups who are involved itself.
Yeah, and the main point here is they should also feel a economic benefit from this, because most of these women have been household in the household wives. Now they have come into this SHGs. They create awareness. Now they see the prospects of generating revenue for themselves, and also for this for the SLRM centers to sustain by selling these recyclables. So they already know the benefit of it.
That incentive is easier, Ravi, in one sense, but means the more difficult part is for them to systematically collect the data and keep it. Is there a way to find financial incentive around that you are also thinking about?
Mr. Subhagato, I actually wanted to add something here
Yeah,
with
sure.
respect to this last point. Actually, in Odisha specifically, you have these local self-help group women who are handling the FSTPs and these material recovery centers, right? They
That's right.
are exceptionally good with bookkeeping. So they actually
Absolutely.
measure and account for all this data. So when I was there, for instance, for some data collection process, it was very easily made available because of their involvement in this process. So I kind of concur with what Ravi is mentioning here, that it could be integrated in a sense, kind of trying to crowdsource data from reliable self-help groups and cooperatives, something on that lines.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Means if means they right now maintain it in ledgers and stuff like that. If they were to do it through an online system or something, it could easily be captured. But my worry is that transition from whether there's some experience that you guys have on transitioning from a ledger to the online system, because it also brings in so much more transparency, right? So I have visited many of these groups which are run by NGOs, etc., not self-help groups, where often the staff working there are happy not to report some stuff because they're reselling it on the sly, right? But when you make it online and transparent, there's going to be a loss of revenue there. So I'm wondering whether you all have had any experiences around transitioning it.
Yeah, for in the interest of your time, I would suggest a case study of Chikiti in Odisha, where this online mapping of data has been done already.
Okay.
It's also probably because Chikiti is kind of highly ranked in the Swachh Sarvekshan side of
Right.
things, and they've created a lot of empowerment of local cooperatives. but specifically look at that case study, and I think it might show some light at the end of the tunnel.
Surely, will do.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Anything else, guys? Folks?
That's it
I
from our
think Dr. Nopatra
All
is
right.
here in the channel anymore. But
Good.
thank
Thanks
you,
so much,
Ravi,
Rachit. Over to
for
you. Thanks.
thank you so much, Ravi and Avinash, for adding the bits and really making it more three-dimensional conversation. And I think now, in lieu of everyone's time, I think we should start wrapping it up. So I'd say, Dr. Subhagato, do you have any way forward or just to loop everyone in one last time for a quick 2-minute talk?
Yeah, no, so just no, I want to thank everyone for being in here, for adding your thoughts to the exercise, and wanting to state that as we move forward and we try and take get more systematized data, useful for both governments as well for action, as well as for and involve sanitation experts working more closely with government in a more informed manner. Within this broad scope of things, this framework itself was an attempt at that, and we are very glad that Odisha did take it up. We are hoping that with the help of e-government foundation and NIUA, this can be replicated and scaled up at the national level too. But it is very early days for us to be thinking about to make any commitments towards that. But in case anyone wants to participate and have some ideas in this broader scaling up exercise, we more than welcome everybody and any thoughts and actions that might be possible in trying to take these learnings nationwide and to beyond Swachh Sarkshan of trying to make sure that you implement a set of programs well, make this like a tool for critical analysis of municipalities and state governments serving the sanitation needs of their communities. So thanks so much and for all of this. Over to you, Rachit.
Okay, Dr. Subhagato. And I would also like to say to everyone here, if you still have any questions, you can just write us an email on the same email you received the invite. That is gwsc@ait.asia, and we will surely reach out to you on whatever your queries are. I think finally wrapping it up, I would ask Dr. Mahreen to maybe speak a few words and just end it up.
Well, I think, thank you. First of all, thank you to all the people who joined us. I know it's like this is what we were discussing before, that today being the World Toilet Day, there have been back-to-back events. But thank you for this overwhelming response and making this a success. It was a two-way process where I think as organizers, we also got to know how cities, how consultants, how stakeholders from various sectors can take this up. And as rightly mentioned, that it can be customized as per the need of a particular city or at a national level. But I would request on behalf of all GWSC, SCI, and NIUA, I take this opportunity to request everybody to stay in touch with us, so that if you have any queries or how we can run this tool across the areas or across the city states where you are working, we would be happy to be part of that initiative. we are well aware that yes, it's a much more comprehensive tool. So that means we need to have a buy-in from various departments. But yes, happy to be part of this initiative. And I also take this liberty to say that if we do any further trainings, be it face-to-face, I think, Subhagato, there is a need, which I feel, looking at the demand from this masterclass, that we should do a face-to-face training also, so that even if some component of this framework can be inculcated or absorbed in any of the city, state, or national level, that is something we should take into perspective. Yes, was the story of Odisha, but yes, just to share an anecdote. 2 days back, we had a meeting with the Commissioner cum Secretary of Sikkim. And even now, states, the secretaries are looking forward to a very in-depth data, because this is the demand of not only Sikkim, but we are getting these demands from various states that the states are lacking in data, and how organizations like GWSC, SII, and many more who have been part of this masterclass can help and chip in. So yeah, it was such a wonderful masterclass. I enjoyed it, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed this masterclass. Just taking this liberty, we have a regional conclave, a Parvat Manthan, which NIUA leads as a secretariat. We are targeting the Himalayan range, sorry. You're most welcome to join, because we will have different stakeholders, and it will be good South-South collaboration to ponder on, and to also showcase the tool. So yes, leaving on this note, so let us all together work for a much more inclusive city, sanitation, whatever you may say. Yes, looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mahreen.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Rachit. Bye.
Thank you, Rachit. Thank you.
You. Bye.
Bye, guys.